In 2 out of the past 3 off seasons, the Phoenix Suns, yes, the Phoenix Suns have been the number one destination for the top superstar available. So, after Chris Paul and Kevin Durant both wanted to come to Phoenix, are the Suns a destination now? We'll break it down on today's episode of Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 5 seasons and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Friday. If you're finding us for the first time on your favorite podcast platform, on YouTube, wherever you are, we're free everywhere. Hit subscribe, hit follow, make sure you do not miss us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday through the month of August and into early September, and then 5 days strong once training camp hits. You do not want to miss a single thing. Okay? You don't want to miss a single thing. Does that make sense? You can follow us at Locked On PHX Suns or me at Brendon Kleen 14 over on Twitter.com as well. We are in the aftermath of Kevin Durant being here. We're in the aftermath of a long summer, a long, very quiet summer because of Kevin Durant holding everything up. Patrick Beverley gets traded right away once the floodgates open. I think we're going to continue to see moves, but that's a kind of a conversation for a different time. We'll get to some of that later in the show with regard to the forward position and Jae Crowder. But I want to keep on the Durant topic for at least one more day, although not specifically about Kevin Durant, because he's not a Phoenix Sun, and he's not going to be a Phoenix Sun anytime soon, if ever. But I think there's an interesting part of this here that I personally didn't talk about during all of this madness, but now that we have a little bit of time here, I think it's worth exploring. So here's where I'm coming from. In 2020, the very, very condensed offseason we had that fall, winter, basically, Chris Paul wanted to come here, right? This year, Kevin Durant names the Phoenix Suns as his number one destination. And for one fleeting moment, we even had Brian Windhorst saying on ESPN's airwaves that in the end, he expected Durant to become a Sun. Okay, so that's 2 for 2 in terms of big-time superstars changing teams. Off the top of my head, we didn't really have any change teams last summer. We haven't really had any this summer in terms of the very, very top players in the league that are difference makers in the title race. So in that way, the Suns are really 2 for 2 in the past couple of instances of this. So let's start with Chris Paul, going back in time a little bit. If you remember, well, even last summer when he was a free agent and could leave the Suns, there was a little bit of buzz around, could he try to go to the Lakers, right? And that was the case in 2020 as well. Now, they, of course, were coming off of a championship, and they had their sights set on some different things. Russell Westbrook, of course, but there was noise there too, right? I don't know if the Lakers would have really had the pieces to pull something like that off with the first round pick shortage that they were in, but that was out there. It has been for years because of his relationship with LeBron James, his obvious connection to Los Angeles. That's where his family is still based. But on top of that, you also had a lot of rumors, probably even more so than the Lakers, around the Heat, but especially the Bucks and the 76ers. Those were the two teams from the very beginning. I felt like he was going to land in one of those two places. The Sixers needed more of a traditional ball handler next to Simmons and Embiid. The Bucks needed the same with Giannis. They obviously go get Drew Holiday instead. The Heat eventually go get Kyle Lowry instead in 2021. But instead of all of that, Chris Paul knew the Suns had the pieces to get him and that he could help build a winner here, and that he had some familiarity with Monty Williams, Willie Green, Devin Booker, and so he chose to come here. This summer, you had Kevin Durant, of course. Now, of course, he did say the Heat apparently were one of the places he strongly wanted to go as well, but I don't know how real that was. It was definitely an option, right? A possibility. I think you would also include the Mavs and the Knicks, but then especially the Raptors, Celtics, and Pelicans, who are the other three teams most strongly linked to him. And yet, I think the culture here, the on-court style that this team plays, those things appealed to KD greatly, and he wanted to come here. So I think there's no denying that that the Phoenix Suns are a destination. The question is why, and will it continue? So I think on the why part of this, I just think there's no avoiding, there's no getting around the fact that the infrastructure that is in place here with James Jones and Monty Williams especially is just incredibly appealing. Like I don't think it's more complicated than that. I think if you have, you don't have to look much further with the KD side of this than the fact that, let's even go one step further. The KD side is he just asked for his coach and general manager to be fired, right? So if you take that as seriously, then you would also say, okay, well, having a great general manager and coach, which the Suns have, they have a recent executive of the year as well as a recent coach of the year, then that should appeal to players, right? And then even going back further, when Chris Paul wanted to leave the Rockets originally, he did not get along with the general manager, it seems, and Daryl Morey, and then the star player too, which brings us to Devin Booker, right? The Suns are becoming a destination. I think you have to admit or acknowledge that Booker is a huge part of that as well. He is the type of person, the type of teammate, I think, the type of just hooper and basketball player that attracts other elite talent and other great players. They want to play with Devin Booker. Also, of course, from a market standpoint, look, the city is big, it's close to Los Angeles, and it has great weather. Those things have always been going for the Suns and for Phoenix. Although if you look at the history of the Suns or the history of any Arizona sports team, that doesn't always really get the job done. So these other factors are obviously the biggest thing. And I guess that brings us to will it continue, right? The Suns roster right now, I think if you're on the side of it will continue, the roster is a big reason why. The Suns roster right now is built for trades. You have through the rest of this season, you will have Dario Saric and Jae Crowder as expiring contracts. You have Mikal Bridges on an affordable, valuable contract. He's not overpaid. He's properly paid, maybe a little bit underpaid. Cam Johnson may be on the same type of contract soon. You have guys like Torrey Craig and Cam Payne who are also tradable. Landry Shamet the same. And, of course, you have DeAndre Ayton who can be that big stacking point for a mega trade if you need to do one, right? Also, James Jones, Monty Williams, Devin Booker, the three guys I just mentioned, they're all locked in long-term. Chris Paul is not, but of course he's older, so no one would expect that they're going to come to Phoenix and be playing with Chris Paul for the next 5 to 10 years, but they might feel that way with Booker. They might feel that they can be coached by Monty and managed by James Jones. I think on the negative side of this, look, Robert Sarver is a question mark. I think that's obvious. We don't know the status of this investigation. Still, take a shot or do your bingo board. That's the umpteenth time I've said that on this podcast this summer. But if you look at what the Suns have done from a personnel standpoint, from building out the front office, everything they've done recently, Jones seems to have control here. And I don't know if there's anything subliminal there that, look, he's kind of taken control because something might be coming with Sarver. I mean, it's just impossible to speculate. But the bottom line is he seems to have carte blanche to do what he wants to do and make moves. On the negative side as well here, I think there is the open question. What happens when the young core is either older or gone completely, right? Like right now, you can come to Phoenix and you can feel like, hey, not only do I have Booker, Monty, and Jones, but I also have these young guys that I'm going to be able to continue to compete with and win with. I don't know if that's quite as desirable if and when, Mikal Bridges is 30, Cameron Johnson is 30, right? Like it stops being affordable, but it also stops being such a high upside situation. So the Suns with this group in place clearly are a destination. I think there's no way around that. But while that also can give the Suns some fallback options right now, it too goes to show how important this right now, this title window really is, and why it's necessary to nail that transition away from Chris Paul when that eventually comes. So I think that's where everybody's attention is shifting. Can they continue to maximize what they have right now, win a championship with Chris Paul, with Devin Booker, and carry that forward with whatever star eventually wants to come here as well? Because recent history has shown us someone will, but you got to keep making it that way. It doesn't just happen. One player who could play a key role in deciding how the Suns fare this season, though, made his return to the court today. And coming up next, I'll tell you why Dario Saric may just be the biggest addition of the offseason for your Phoenix Suns. Today's show, guys, brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one spot for sports betting, making bets, but also analysis, podcasts, news, all the information that you need to be a smart bettor. Okay, that's it. A smart bettor. You have Cardinals odds. You can bet on exact season wins. The leader in the pack is 8. I think that's actually gone down. I don't know what their over-under is on BetOnline right now in general, but 8 wins feels very depressing. I don't want to believe that, but I also have to be realistic with my Cardinals, and that is the extent of how much I would like to talk about them. But whether it is NFL preseason games, whether it is the baseball regular season, whether it's NBA futures, I believe they have over-under on wins for every NBA team now. It's all happening at BetOnline. That's on their website or their mobile app, and you can learn more about all the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so you know who I'm talking about. I already said it coming into the break. Dario Saric made his return for the Croatian national team in World Cup qualifiers today. There was also a really cool game with Nikola Jokic and Giannis Antetokounmpo playing each other in the qualifiers. But Dario came back, played 28 minutes in his return to the court since game 1 of the NBA Finals in 2021. 9 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. So very, very promising. I would say more than the numbers, honestly, is 28 minutes. Getting to play a legitimate run out there, showing that he's healthy. He looked like himself. He was taking guys off the dribble. He was taking jumpers. He was moving the ball. 9 rebounds means he's embracing contact, right? So all very, very good signs. What I want to talk about, though, is not breaking down the Croatian national team or their chances at making the World Cup or any of that. What I want to talk about instead is what can Dario mean in 2023 for the Phoenix Suns? So I have some numbers for you, quite a bit. I went back into the rabbit hole here. So Cleaning the Glass, which is a site that I use a lot, they measure net impact per 100 possessions for all NBA players. Basically, when you were on the floor, what did your team do, and how much better or worse were they than when you weren't on the floor, right? So the last time Dario was healthy, which was the 2020-21 season, the Suns were the 2 seed, very, very good team. Dario's impact was the best of anybody. The Suns were 6.7 points better per 100 possessions when Dario was out there versus when he was not out there. So basically what that means is they were very good without Dario, but then when he stepped on the floor, they were going to beat you by 7 points per 100 possessions, almost without fail. The next highest, for context there, guys, was Mikal Bridges at plus 3.7. So he was a full 3 points better, more impactful per 100 possessions for this Suns team than the next highest impact player. Incredible. Like we've forgotten very quickly just how good he was. The half-court offense was another part of this, was 6 points better per 100 possessions when Dario was on the floor that season. The half-court offense was also better with Saric on the floor versus Ayton on the floor in 2019-20. So that's a 2-year trend. He is that connector for this team. And trying to think about why that is, I really come down on variety, like versatility, variety, because he just is he's a type of player, and he does things on the floor that just nobody else on this Suns team does. So what I mean by that is, this is a very mid-range heavy team, right? We all know that. But Dario takes most of his shots from three-point land or at the rim. He's also one of the best assisting big men in the NBA. He fits perfectly into Monty's 0.5 system, running stuff from the elbows, running dribble handoff, behind the arc, all that. Dario was great at it before he got to the Suns, but playing in Monty's system has just really unlocked another level of that. He also uses his size and draws fouls better than most Suns players. Like, is he getting to the line 10 times a game? Is he Giannis Antetokounmpo? No, but it's better than most Suns players, and it's pretty good for all NBA forwards. Let's get back into the numbers, okay, to illustrate some of that versatility, because it's not just versatility in terms of skill set, but also lineup options. So last year in 146, or I'm sorry, yes, last year being 2020-21, the last time Dario was healthy, 146 possessions, Dario and Ayton together on the floor. The Suns were plus 11 per 100 possessions. So that's basically Dario at the 4, Ayton at the 5. They just blew the top off of everything. Now, they were actually a little better even than that when it was just Dario and no Ayton. So let's get into those numbers. 1,500, basically 1,600 possessions with Dario and no Ayton. The Suns were plus 11.6. So that's Dario at center, right? Going back one season, both of those were in the negative. So Saric plus Ayton the previous season was minus 8 points per 100 possessions. So they got outscored by 8 points per 100 possessions. Or Dario, no Ayton, they were minus 0.3. Although that, I will give the caveat, the Suns didn't really play Dario at center his first season here in 2019. So that's a little interesting. Saric was mostly just playing those minutes at the 4 with another center, whether that was Aaron Baines or Frank Kaminsky. If you remember, some of those lineups could be pretty devastating for the Suns as well, and they played a lot of that season with no DeAndre Ayton in the lineup because of the suspension. So where does that leave us? We know he does things nobody else does. We know when he's been on the floor for the Suns, he's historically been pretty darn impactful, and we know that he's looking pretty healthy. So I think the one thing is, it looks like he'll be ready to play a big role right away starting on opening night. That's a huge deal. It gives the Suns an element they just didn't have last season once Frank Kaminsky went down. They played JaVale McGee a ton. There's pros and cons to that, but I think the cool thing about Dario that I'm really excited about exploring is that he can play with the starters or the bench, and that could allow DeAndre Ayton to potentially play against backups more. It's not really something the Suns have done a whole lot, but after another season of development from Ayton and then giving him that big contract, I sort of feel like, why not give Ayton some opportunities against backups to post up, to face up, to try to score. And Dario's fit with anybody. He can play with anybody, can allow you to do that. I also think, obviously, he'll just give you more floor spacing, rim pressure, ball movement. There's a reason. Like, it's not rocket science why Monty has always called him a connector. I know there's jokes online with Suns fans of like, he unlocks campaign, he unlocks the offense. There's, the unlocker might be a better thing than the connector. It might be a cliche, but it's all true. So I'm really bullish about the ability of Dario to come in, allow the Suns to be a little more versatile with their lineups, do some different things, diversify their offense a little bit, and just be a better team. I think they need to make moves. We'll talk about that in just a second, but I do think Dario coming back will make this team better, even though it wasn't a new signing or a new trade. The other player manning the 4 spot for the Suns doesn't seem so thrilled to be here. And next, we'll discuss the Suns' options if they want to replace Jae Crowder. And I'll tell you whether I think they can actually improve on him. But first, one more quick break. So with Jae Crowder blurring his logo out, the Suns logo out in his Instagram posts and liking team fans' tweets, not other teams' tweets, just fans who are photoshopping him in other teams' jerseys, it's fair to say Crowder's status in Phoenix is up for debate. It's tenuous right now. There's no guarantee he will be back. I want to go through, because it's easy to say move on from Crowder. It's easy to say start Cam Johnson. And I agree with those things to a degree. I think you can move on from Crowder and still be a pretty good team. I think Cam Johnson has earned the opportunity to potentially start this year. But I think it's easier said than done to actually improve on Crowder. So where I want to start is why he's important, because I think we might forget that sometimes. What he gives you, I think he's one of the best role-playing forwards in the NBA. He gives you individual defense against everyone from Anthony Davis to Chris Middleton. He's maybe the best help defender on this team, a top 10 defense, and he might be the single best help defender on the whole team. Okay? He's going to dig into the post, and he's great at double teaming, some of those things we've seen with Jokic or other guys. He's great at rotating. He always knows where to be. He's perfect at helping at the nail when a ball handler is driving to the basket and then being able to then recover back out to the corner to contest a three. He's never in the wrong place. He's a confident volume three-point shooter. I mean, we all remember the playoffs this past season when it felt like nobody knew what to do when the ball was in their hands. And there was Jae, couldn't make a shot in the first round and wasn't very spectacular in the second round, but boy, if he didn't at least just cock back and fire, right? Like, he does that. And I think that lends itself to the last point, which is he's the energy and the heart of this team. And all those things combine to make him, once again, to me, one of the better role players in the whole NBA. So that's just something to keep in mind as we talk about moving on from him, replacing him, anything. So let's start with free agents. I think you're looking at veterans at this point who may or may not be NBA players anymore. Carmelo Anthony, LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin, Paul Millsap. I mean, those are the names. I don't see anybody there who would qualify as an improvement over Crowder, right? Probably not even any of those players are worth rostering if you're the Suns, but they're definitely not going to be guys who you would play over Crowder in a rotation. So where does that leave us? I think that leaves you looking at the Mitchell trade, the Donovan Mitchell trade, because the Jazz have players that they're not going to need. The Knicks have players that they don't really need. And that might only get more intensified as the Mitchell trade gets closer. So on the Jazz side, it's pretty obvious to me. Bojan Bogdanovic. He's on an expiring contract at $19.6 million. So it couldn't just be Crowder. You would probably be looking at Crowder and Craig. I think that could probably get you in the right range. Maybe you can throw in something small on top of that. I think you could get the job done. If you probably have to give up, no, I don't think you have to give up a first round pick. Maybe it's 2 second-round picks. Maybe it's a campaign and Jae Crowder. I just don't think they have a need for Bogdanovic. Who is he, right? He's a hyper-efficient shooter. He has been about a 60% true shooting for 3-4 seasons in a row. He nails his threes. He can get hot, which is nice. But he's 33 years old, and 72% of his shots this past season were assisted. So he's just not somebody who is going to create offense for you. And he's not nearly the defender that Crowder is. So then we look over to the Knicks. I think the obvious candidate there is Julius Randle. He has 4 seasons left at 24, 26, 28, and 30 million, respectively. But on the positive side, from a value standpoint, the Knicks price seems incredibly low. Like, there's reports going around on Thursday as I'm recording this of the Knicks will refuse to give up a pick attached to Randle to get off of him. That's where they are, right? So the price to get Randle would be quite low. Now, you do have to add up to his salary, so you're probably looking at, Crowder, Craig, and Shamet or something along those lines, and, maybe a couple second-round picks, something like that. It really is just a salary-clearing mechanism for the Knicks, who now have Brunson, potentially Mitchell, to start building around, and they don't need Randle anymore. I think he's a pretty good player. I just want to say that. Like, he's an inconsistent three-point shooter, but just about everything. And shot selection, can he coexist with other great offensive players? Could he play in this 0.5 system? Those things are all questions. But in terms of value, what is he providing you every night when he steps on the floor? He can score in face-up and post-up situations. He can move the ball. He's a tough physical player. He can draw fouls. He's also a better defender than he gets credit for. Like, he's been a plus in terms of most of the defensive metrics you look at. Not like a major defensive player of the year type of guy, but an impactful defender. And I think he's kind of always been that. I think, at times he might have had, better or worse seasons year to year, but I think he's a pretty decent defender, and he can play either big man spot. He can rebound, obviously, and he can just do a lot of different things on the floor. I buy that he would fit here and be helpful. I just don't know if he's worth it at that price. I don't know if he wants to be here, if he'll be happy here. I think he's been a guy who's just been jerked around a lot in his career and doesn't seem to have ever found a great situation. But I think in a vacuum, if you just told me, hey, Julius Randle could be on this team and it doesn't matter what he costs to trade for, it doesn't matter what he costs on salary, would he help the Suns? I think I would say yes. So where does that leave us with Crowder? Is it worth moving Jae Crowder? And these are just some of the options at forward, but the point is the forward options are bleak. That's part of why Crowder has been so valuable in the first place. It's a position that's highly coveted around the NBA. So if you can get a guy who's good at that spot, you probably don't want to get rid of him, like just as a general rule. For the Suns, I think the replacement plan is probably more so than finding a replacement forward to me, because we just went through those options and there's not a perfect one. I think the replacement plan is probably Cam Johnson and Dario Saric. Now, obviously, we had this pipe dream. Not a pipe dream. We had this dream all summer that it would be Kevin Durant who was the replacement, and he would have been a huge improvement. Maybe you're somebody who still thinks after DeAndre Ayton becomes available or as we get closer to the trade deadline, the Suns should just still hold out on hope of getting Durant. And I would believe you. I would agree with you if I knew for sure Durant would ever be an option for the Suns again. I'm just not convinced of that. So I think as of now, the replacement plan for Crowder would probably just be Cam Johnson starting and Dario Saric playing some four. I mean, I think that's where we are. If you do want to trade Crowder, explore what you have there. Potentially, if he is that frustrated and doesn't want to play here anymore, I think the best course of action is seeing if you can use him not to get another forward, but instead to get a guard. Jordan Clarkson, Duncan Robinson, the guys I've talked about all summer, those would be better players than anybody we've named. Maybe not Julius Randle, but they're not as expensive as Julius Randle. And they would help with something you have more of a need for, especially Clarkson, right? A guard who can create. Otherwise, if those guard options don't materialize or you don't love them, if none of these forward things really feel like worth the while, and you don't want to move on to just Cam and Dario just for the sake of it, then I think you just keep him into the regular season. Maybe he is somebody you can trade for a Kevin Durant or another bigger player down the line. Maybe he's somebody that he just helps you win. Like, that's not going away unless he's just truly fed up. He is good. He is impactful. He is a helpful player. So there's no reason to just get rid of somebody like that just to do it. So that's where I land. It's easy to say move on from Crowder. It's easy to say, oh, this player or that player would be such an improvement. It's another thing entirely to actually find that guy, and I just don't see it right now. So we'll see. There's going to be more movement, guys. This Mitchell trade is going to happen. If you read anything about it, it seems incredibly likely Mitchell will be gone. They just traded another role player away in Patrick Beverley. They don't have any intentions to win this season. It seems pretty clear. So once that happens, there will be even more shaken loose, and the Suns are going to be there to be opportunistic if they choose to do so. That's it for the week, folks. We'll be back next week. 3 guests, actually. Aaron Edwards, Dan Bickley, Dwayne Rankin, okay? I have them all locked in, so I can tell you them for now. Dan Bickley, longtime personality here locally. Dwayne Rankin, beat writer of the Suns, and then Aaron Edwards for his weekly check-in. That is the schedule. Hit follow, hit subscribe, leave a review if you're so nice. Leave a comment down below on YouTube telling me your thoughts on the Crowder situation or the Dario situation, and I will do my best to respond. In the meantime, go make Locked On NBA your second listen here on this Friday morning to catch up on everything else going on around the league.